Emily Walker had always loved the quiet of the early morning on the savannah. At 10 years old, she was small for her age, with sun-kissed hair and a pair of curious blue eyes that seemed to capture every detail of the world around her. Most children her age spent their weekends sleeping in or watching cartoons, but Emily woke before dawn just to accompany her father on wildlife surveys across the sprawling conservation lands of northern Kenya. It was their tradition, one she cherished more than anything else. That morning, the air was cool, painted with the faint scent of dew on wild grass. Pale orange light stretched across the horizon, slowly revealing a world that felt both ancient and alive. Emily walked carefully behind her father's long stride, her notebook clutched tightly to her chest. She liked writing down the animals she saw, sketching their shapes, imagining their stories. Everything felt peaceful, predictable, the way nature usually was at dawn. But then she saw it. At first, she thought the small shape beneath a thorny acacia bush was nothing more than a tuft of golden grass. But something about the way it quivered barely, desperately pulled her eyes back. Emily froze. Her father took a few more steps before realizing she was no longer beside him. "Em? What is it?" he asked, turning around. She didn't answer. She stepped forward slowly, heart hammering in her chest. And there, lying half-hidden beneath the branches, was a tiny lion cub, no more than 2 months old, its fur patchy and dull, its ribs protruding through its skin. Flies hovered near its eyes. Its breathing was shallow, quick, each breath sounding like it might be its last. Emily's lips parted, but no sound came out. She knelt beside the little creature, her hands trembling. "Dad, he's dying." Her father crouched down next to her, his face tightening with concern. He lifted the cub gently, checking for wounds. There were none, no bite marks, no signs of attack, only starvation and exhaustion. "It's been abandoned," he said quietly. "Maybe the mother was forced to move the pride. Maybe she didn't survive. Whatever happened, he won't make it through the day like this." Emily felt something sharp twist inside her chest. She had seen injured animals before, but never something this young, this helpless, this alone. Without thinking, she reached out and cradled the cub against her chest. Its body was cold, too light, too fragile. "We have to help him," she whispered. Her father hesitated. "Em, lion cubs don't survive well in human care, and if the mother is still out here—" "She isn't," Emily said firmly. "Look at him. He's been like this for days." Her father looked at her. Really looked at her, this small, determined girl with tears gathering in her eyes, and he exhaled slowly. He knew that once Emily's heart caught onto something, she wouldn't let go. "All right," he said softly. "We'll try. But he needs warmth and milk immediately." Emily nodded and wrapped her arms around the cub more tightly. As she stood, he let out a tiny sound, halfway between a mew and a gasp, as though acknowledging her presence. It hit her with the force of a promise she didn't yet understand. They hurried back toward the research station, Emily clutching the cub every step of the way. She didn't feel the weight of him so much as she felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders. She didn't know then that this moment, this fragile life pressed against her heart, would change the course of her entire future. All she knew was that she would not let him die. Not today, not if she could stop it. The small clinic room at the research station smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm milk, a strange combination that somehow felt comforting to Emily. She sat on a low stool beside the makeshift cot, where the cub now lay wrapped in soft blankets. The morning sun filtered through the canvas walls, casting gentle patterns across the little creature's frail body. For the first few hours, Emily barely moved. She watched every slow rise and fall of the cub's chest, terrified that each breath might be his last. Her mother mixed formula milk carefully, heating it just enough to mimic the warmth of a lioness. Emily held the bottle with both hands, her fingers trembling, while her father supported the cub's tiny head. At first, it didn't respond. Its eyes stayed half closed, unfocused, caught somewhere between exhaustion and surrender. Emily's heart squeezed painfully. "Come on, little one," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Please." As if answering her plea, the cub made a faint, pitiful sound. Its mouth twitched. Then, slowly, achingly slowly, it latched onto the bottle. The first swallow was weak, almost uncertain. The second was stronger. By the third, Emily gasped as relief washed over her like a tidal wave. "He's drinking," she said, tears glistening. Her father allowed himself a small smile. "That's a good sign." From that moment forward, caring for the cub became Emily's entire world. She gave up her afternoons, her evenings, even her sleep. She set alarms to wake every 2 hours throughout the night, to feed him, refusing to let her parents take shifts. "He needs someone who won't let him feel alone again," she insisted whenever they tried to intervene. Her mother exchanged a look with her father but never argued. They had always known their daughter felt things more deeply than most, and the cub, this helpless, trembling scrap of life, had somehow slipped into her heart with a force neither of them could have predicted. Within a week, small changes began to show. The cub's fur lost its dull, lifeless texture and began to shine faintly under the lamp. Its breathing grew steadier, its tiny paws stronger. One morning, Emily walked into the clinic to find him standing wobbly and uncertain, but standing on all fours. She gasped and dropped to her knees. "You did it! Look at you!" The cub turned awkwardly toward her voice. For the first time, its eyes pale gold, wide and curious, focused clearly. Something passed between them then, something that felt ancient and unspoken. Emily held out her hand, and the cub took a stumbling step forward before pressing its head against her palm. Her father watched from the doorway, his expression softening even as concern creased his brow. He stepped inside quietly. He said, choosing his words carefully, "You're doing an incredible job, but you need to remember something. He's a wild animal. He won't be yours forever." "I know," Emily replied quickly, almost too quickly. She stroked the cub's cheek, avoiding her father's eyes. "I'm just helping him until he can go back." But deep down, even at 10 years old, she knew she was lying. She had already given a part of herself to this little lion, and the thought of letting him go tightened her chest like a fist. As the days turned into weeks, the cub followed her everywhere. He waited for her footsteps each morning, cried when she stepped outside, and slept curled against her leg whenever she sat beside him. Emily started keeping notes in her journal, documenting his progress, sketching his growing paws, his widening shoulders, the faint spots along his back fading as he aged. She never dared speak the name she kept in her heart. Naming him felt too dangerous, too permanent, but she whispered it silently whenever she held him. One evening, after a long day of formula feedings and exercises to strengthen his legs, the cub curled up in her lap, purring softly as he drifted into sleep. Emily brushed a hand over his warm fur and looked out toward the distant savannah, glowing orange under the setting sun. "You're going to grow big and strong," she murmured, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and dread. "And one day, I'll have to say goodbye." She didn't know it then, but the savannah had already begun shifting around her life, preparing a story far larger than anything she could imagine, one tied forever to the tiny lion sleeping against her heart. The cub was thriving by the 4th week. His steps were no longer clumsy, his small roars grew louder, and he followed Emily with the confidence of an animal that finally believed the world wanted him alive. Emily adored every moment, the way he pounced on fallen leaves, the way he nuzzled against her hand, the way he searched for her whenever she left the room. She tried to ignore the tightening knot in her chest every time her father reminded her this could not last. But nature has its own schedule, and it rarely waits for the heart to prepare. It happened just before dawn. Emily woke to the sound of distant rumbling, a deep, resonant vibration that traveled through the ground more than the air. She sat up in her cot, heart pounding, straining to listen. Another rumble followed, this one unmistakable. A lioness's roar. The cub, sleeping beside her, lifted his head. His ears twitched. Then he let out a small, questioning sound, as if he recognized the voice calling to him from the wild. Emily's stomach twisted. She grabbed her jacket and hurried outside. The sky was still dark, a faint blue line hinting at sunrise across the horizon. Her father was already awake, binoculars in hand, scanning the area beyond the wire perimeter. "You heard it too," she whispered. He nodded. "She's close, very close. And she's been searching for her missing cub for a long time." Emily felt the cub press against her leg. The idea of losing him, of handing him back to a world where she could not protect him, felt unbearable. But she knew the truth. Lions belonged with lions. Still, she wasn't ready. The roar came again, louder this time, echoing across the grassland with a mixture of desperation and warning. Emily shivered. This wasn't a hunting roar. This was a mother calling for her lost child. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. If she finds him here and thinks we kept him away, she might charge. Lionesses are ruthless when protecting their young." "She thinks we stole him," Emily whispered, the realization cutting deep. Her father didn't respond, and that silence was an answer in itself. Moments later, movement flickered near the edge of the encampment. A tawny shape emerged between the tall grasses, a large lioness, her ribs visible beneath her coat, her eyes sharp with exhaustion and fury. She paced the perimeter, sniffing the air, following the scent that led her straight to the clinic tent. The cub let out a cry, a high, brittle sound of recognition. The lioness froze. Her head snapped toward Emily, her gaze locking onto the tiny figure at the girl's feet. Her expression softened for only a heartbeat before a guttural growl rumbled through her chest. She lowered her body, ears flat, ready to defend what was hers. Emily felt her father's hand tighten around her arm. "Get back," he said urgently. "She'll kill to get to him." But Emily didn't move. The cub brushed against her ankle, trembling, confused. Emily looked into his pale gold eyes and understood what she had to do, even though every part of her wanted to scream and run and hide him away forever. "It's okay," she whispered to him, her voice breaking. "She's your mother." Then, before her father could stop her, Emily stepped past the fence gate and walked into the open grassland, the cub cradled in her arms. The lioness tensed, muscles coiled, ready to leap. Her roar split the morning air. But Emily didn't flinch. She walked forward slowly, her breath shaky, her heart hammering, until there was nothing between them but the fragile hope that the lioness understood she meant no harm. Emily knelt and placed the cub on the ground. The world held still. The cub stumbled toward his mother with a soft cry. The lioness lowered her head, and the impossible moment began. For a heartbeat, neither Emily nor the lioness moved. Dawn light slowly washed over the savannah, bathing everything in a pale gold glow that seemed far too gentle for a moment so heavy. The cub teetered forward, letting out a soft cry that cracked something inside Emily's chest. His tiny body brushed against his mother's front leg, and the lioness exhaled a long, trembling breath. It wasn't a roar this time. It was relief. The lioness lowered her massive head, nudging the cub with a tenderness that felt almost human. She sniffed him carefully, checking him from nose to tail, as though making sure each piece of him was real, present, alive. The cub answered with weak, excited grunts, pressing into her warmth as if he'd been waiting his whole life to feel it again. Emily swallowed hard. Her eyes burned. She didn't realize she was crying until a warm tear slid across her cheek. Her father stepped up behind her. "You did the right thing," he murmured. But Emily's heart didn't agree. It felt like someone had reached inside her chest and twisted. How could doing the right thing hurt this much? How could love mean letting go? The lioness lifted her head then. Her amber eyes met Emily's across the stretching field of grass. For a moment, Emily froze. She expected anger, blame, accusation, but none of those were there. Instead, she saw something startling recognition. The lioness took one slow step toward Emily. Her father pulled her back slightly, but Emily resisted. Her breath caught as the lioness closed the distance just enough to lower her head, not in aggression, not in warning. In acknowledgement, a silent "thank you." Emily pressed a hand to her trembling mouth. The lioness's gaze lingered only a second longer before she grasped her cub gently between her jaws and turned toward the open savanna. Her powerful body moved with renewed strength, muscles rippling beneath her tawny coat. The cub dangled safely, making small sounds of contentment. Within moments, they reached the tall grasses. The lioness paused once more, glancing back over her shoulder. Then she slipped into the wild, swallowed by the shifting sea of gold. The cub didn't look back. That was the part that hurt the most. Emily sank to her knees, the weight of the moment crushing her. She pressed both hands to her face, sobbing into her palms. Her father knelt beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "You gave him life," he said softly. "He wouldn't be with her now without you." But Emily couldn't feel pride. Not yet. All she felt was the absence, the empty space where the cub's warm body used to fit against her arms. She had saved him only to lose him. The sting of that truth would stay with her for years. As the sun climbed higher, painting the world bright and brilliant, Emily stared at the place where the lioness had disappeared. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even jealous. She simply felt hollow. A quiet, aching promise formed inside her chest. One day, she would return to these lands, not as a child with a broken heart, but as someone strong enough to protect creatures like him, someone who understood the wild instead of fearing its cruelty. She didn't know it then. But the savannah had not finished with her. The goodbye she mourned today was only the first chapter of a story far larger than she could imagine. 14 years passed, but the memory of the cub never faded. Sometimes it drifted through Emily's dreams, a flash of pale gold eyes, a tiny paw resting on her hand, the warmth of a small body curled against her at night. Other times it returned without warning while she was studying in college or walking through a crowded city street. Loss, she learned, never vanished. It only softened around the edges. By 24, Emily had become exactly what she promised herself on that heartbreaking morning long ago: a wildlife conservationist. She specialized in large predators, studying their movements, their behavior, and the delicate balance they held within fragile ecosystems. Her colleagues admired her gentle patience with animals, a quality that seemed instinctive, built from something older than her years. So when she received an invitation to return to the Kenyan reserve where she grew up, she didn't hesitate. The moment she stepped off the transport jeep, the savannah wind hit her like a welcome she never knew she'd been waiting for. The grasslands were the same shimmering gold she remembered, stretching endlessly beneath a sky so wide it made her chest ache. She inhaled deeply, letting the scent of dust, sun, and distant rain wash through her. "Feels like home again, doesn't it?" Her old mentor, Dr. Kamau, greeted with a warm grin. "More than you know," Emily whispered. During her first week back, Emily threw herself into fieldwork, tracking collared lions, reviewing camera traps, monitoring territories. Each rustle of grass reminded her of a past she wasn't ready to voice. She often found herself scanning the horizon longer than necessary, searching for something she knew was impossible. He would be grown now, if he survived. A full adult male, powerful, wild. A creature who had no reason to remember a girl from his infancy. Yet she searched anyway. One late afternoon, while reviewing GPS data near a dried riverbed, Emily stepped away from her team to check unusual movement patterns on the map. The air was warm, humming with insects, the wind unusually still. She crouched beside a cluster of thorn bushes, adjusting her equipment. A low vibration rolled through the earth. Not thunder, a presence. Emily froze. Slowly, she turned her head. From behind a line of tall grass, a lion emerged, massive, golden, magnificent. His mane was a deep, sunlit amber, thick around his shoulders and throat. Muscles rippled under his coat with each measured step. His face bore the scars of battles fought and won, but his eyes were soft, familiar, pale gold. Emily's breath caught, her pulse stumbling. The lion stopped several yards away, head lifted, nostrils flaring as he studied her. She should have stepped back. She knew every protocol, every rule of predator safety, but her legs refused to move. "Impossible," she whispered. The lion walked closer, though not like a hunter. There was no stalking, no tension in his body. Instead, he moved with an almost cautious grace, as though he didn't want to frighten her. Emily's throat tightened. No, it can't be. Then he did something that shattered every rule of nature. He bowed his head. A full-grown male lion, king of the grasslands, lowered himself before her, placing his enormous weight onto his forelegs, his mane brushing the earth. Her vision blurred with sudden tears. "Is it you?" she breathed. "Is it really you?" The lion blinked slowly, deliberately. She recognized that gesture. She had seen it once before, from a cub who had taken his first steps in her care. Emotion crashed over her like a tidal wave. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips, unable to speak. The world around her fell silent, the wind, the insects, even the distant calls of other animals. It was as if the savannah itself held its breath. The cub she once saved, the life she once let go, had found her again, not by accident, but by memory. The reunion haunted Emily for days. She replayed it every night, those pale gold eyes, that impossible moment when the lion bowed his massive head as though greeting an old friend. She told no one. Some things were too fragile, too sacred to explain, and a part of her feared people would try to track him, tag him, study him. She wouldn't risk dragging him back into human affairs. Not again. Still, something in her heart felt fuller, steadier. She had thought the savannah had taken him from her forever, yet here he was, alive, powerful, and strangely gentle in a way no wild lion should be. A week later, everything changed. Emily and two colleagues were assigned to survey a narrow gorge known for seasonal flash floods and unstable cliff edges. They needed updated terrain data before the rainy months. The sun was high, the heat shimmering off the rocks, when Emily moved ahead to photograph soil erosion patterns. "Stay near the markers," one of her teammates called. "I'll only be a minute," she replied. She shouldn't have gone further. Loose gravel shifted under her boots. She felt the ground tilt before she heard the crack. The cliffside broke beneath her, sending her sliding down a steep incline. She tried to grab onto roots, rocks, anything, but everything crumbled under her hands. Her shoulders slammed against a ledge, then her body pitched over the edge. She fell. The world spun, dust exploding around her. She hit the lower slope hard, pain ripping through her leg as something snapped with a sickening pop. Her head struck stone, stars bursting across her vision. When the dust settled, she was wedged between two jutting rocks, halfway down the gorge wall, alive, but barely. "Emily!" Voices shouted from above, faint and panicked. "Don't move." She tried to call back, but her voice was a raw croak. Pain screamed through her body with every breath. Blood trickled warm down her temple. When she attempted to shift her leg, fire shot up her spine. Broken. Definitely broken. Her radio crackled uselessly beside her, damaged in the fall. She was alone. The sun sank lower. Shadows stretched across the gorge like dark, reaching fingers. The air grew cold. And then, as daylight faded, the real danger came. Hyenas. Their laughter echoed from somewhere above the ridge, shrill, eager, circling the scent of injury. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. She pressed herself deeper into the rocks, trembling. She had seen hyenas pull down antelope twice their size. A wounded human would be nothing to them. The first pair of glowing eyes appeared at the top of the slope. "Please," Emily whispered, tears spilling. "Not like this." Another hyena joined the first, then a third. They descended slowly, confident, their silhouettes sharp against the rising moon. Emily squeezed her eyes shut. A thunderous roar shattered the night. Not a hyena's cackle, not a lioness's call. A full, earth-shaking, bone-deep roar that vibrated through the rocks around her. Emily's eyes flew open. At the top of the slope stood the golden-maned lion, the same lion who had bowed to her, the cub she once saved. He stood tall, fur bristling, muscles coiled in lethal power. His roar came again, erupting from his chest like rolling thunder. The hyenas scattered instantly, scrambling over rocks, whining, fleeing into the dark as fast as their legs could carry them. The lion descended, slowly, purposefully, not as a predator, but as a guardian. Emily let out a sob, not of fear, but of overwhelming relief, as he reached her, his massive frame blocking the wind, his warm breath brushing her cheek. He had come for her. He remembered, and he would not let the savannah take her. Not tonight. The lion stood over Emily like a living wall of muscle and golden fur. His presence filled the narrow gorge, pushing back the darkness inch by inch. Emily tried to reach for him, but her arm trembled too hard to lift. Even so, he leaned closer, lowering his great head until his forehead touched her shoulder with stunning gentleness. "I'm okay," she whispered, though her voice quivered and her body shook. "I'm okay now." He seemed to understand. He let out a deep rumble, not a roar, not a warning, but something soft and resonant, a sound Emily remembered faintly from years ago when he was just a cub curled against her chest. A sound of recognition. Night crept deeper into the gorge. Temperatures dropped sharply. Emily's breath came out in visible puffs as cold wrapped around her injured body. Her leg throbbed violently, every heartbeat sending new waves of pain. She tried to stay awake, to keep talking, but her strength faded fast. The lion noticed. He circled her once, then lay down carefully beside her, positioning his enormous body along her injured side. Heat radiated from him in soothing waves. Emily inhaled shakily. His scent, earth, sun, and something wild filled her senses and pulled her back from the edge of fear. She rested her head against his mane. It was softer than she remembered, richer, full. When he breathed, she felt it through her ribs. "You saved me," she whispered. His only answer was the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest. Hours passed. The moon climbed slowly, tracing silver lines along the jagged rock walls. Every so often, the lion lifted his head, ears swiveling, eyes sharp. When hyenas dared to return, even from a distance, he rose with a guttural snarl, so fierce they fled before they ever reached sight. He guarded her the entire night. Emily drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she mumbled words she wasn't aware of. Sometimes she cried quietly against his fur. Each time, the lion stayed perfectly still, as though understanding that any sudden movement might hurt her more. With dawn came warmth, and with warmth came hope. Emily heard voices calling her name, faint at first, then louder, more urgent. "Emily! Emily! Can you hear us?" She tried to respond but couldn't. Her throat was too dry. The lion rose instantly, moving in front of her as rescuers approached the gorge. His mane bristled, his body coiled not in aggression, but in protective instinct. The team froze at the sight. "Oh my God, don't move," one whispered. "There's a male lion with her." Emily forced her voice through the pain. He helped me." The lion glanced back at her. Their eyes met in a moment suspended between worlds. Then, slowly, so slowly, he stepped aside. Not panicked, not threatened, just yielding, giving her back. The rescuers secured her carefully, lifting her onto a stretcher. Emily reached out weakly, her fingers brushing the air between them. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." The lion stood at the base of the slope, watching as she was carried upward. Sunlight poured over him, turning his mane into a halo of blazing gold. When the team reached the top and prepared to transport her, Emily lifted her head one last time. He was still there, silent, steady, unmoving, as if carving her memory into the earth itself. And then, with a final blink, slow, deliberate, the same gesture he'd given her as a cub, he turned and disappeared into the tall grass. Gone, just like the first time. But this time, Emily understood. He wasn't leaving her. He was letting her go. Emily spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from her injuries. She remembered only fragments from the night she was rescued. The cold, the pain, the fear, then the warmth of a familiar mane, and the soft, steady heartbeat that anchored her to life. Doctors and colleagues asked repeatedly how she managed to survive alone in a gorge full of predators. She never said the word lion. Instead, she simply answered, "Someone was watching out for me." But in the quiet hours, when monitors hummed softly and the world outside her window blurred into shifting dusk, her mind replayed every detail with perfect clarity. The bow of his head the day they reunited, his roar tearing the night open, his body curled around hers in the darkness. It felt impossible, yet it was real. He remembered her, and he came. When she was finally strong enough to return to the reserve, the staff welcomed her back with cautious enthusiasm. They insisted she stay within safe perimeters for a while, but Emily knew the savannah well, its rhythms, its dangers, and its quiet mercies. More than that, she felt drawn to its openness, as if something unfinished waited for her out there. One evening, close to sunset, she walked alone to a familiar ridge overlooking the plains. The grass rippled in the fading light, each blade catching fire as the sun dipped lower. The wind carried distant calls of wildlife, elephants trumpeting, zebras braying, the faint hum of insects settling into night. She closed her eyes and let the moment sink into her bones. "I don't know if you're out there," she murmured, "but thank you for saving me, for finding me again." The wind answered with a gentle push against her back. When she opened her eyes, something moved on the far side of the ridge, a silhouette, broad, powerful, golden. Her breath caught. He stood atop a low-rise, massive mane blazing in the sunset, casting long shadows across the earth. Even from the distance, she could see his steady posture, the regal stillness that only a fully grown lion possessed. Yet there was something softer in the way he watched her, something familiar. Emily didn't move. She didn't call out. She simply stood there, heart aching in the same place it had the day she returned the cub to his mother. He remained still for a long moment, as though ensuring she was safe. Then, in a gesture so deliberate it made her knees weaken, he lowered his head, not fully, not as before, but enough to say everything words never could. "Thank you. Goodbye. Live your life." Tears filled Emily's eyes. "Goodbye, boy," she whispered. "I'll never forget you." The lion lifted his head again. For a heartbeat, the world felt suspended between past and present, between the little girl she once was and the woman she had become. Then he turned, not abruptly, not with the cold finality of a wild creature dismissing a human. No, he walked away with the calm assurance of an animal who understood the weight of what they shared, who accepted that their stories had crossed twice, against all odds, and that was enough. Emily watched until the last glimpse of his mane vanished into the sea of grass. Long after he was gone, she remained on the ridge, letting the wind dry the tears streaming down her cheeks. She understood something then, something she wished she had known the day she gave the cub back to his mother. Goodbyes were not endings. They were acknowledgments of a bond strong enough to survive distance, time, and the wild itself. The legend of the girl and the lion would never be written in books or carved into stone. It lived in something far deeper, the memory of two lives saved by each other. And as long as Emily walked the earth, the savannah would never feel empty again.